So think back on all the different activities you did. If you didn't go to camp this week, think back on what you did this week, and at home, or hanging out with friends, or going to camp. How much time did you spend on your phone, or on social media, or just playing games, or like, just think back on all the stuff you did this week, right? Okay. Of all the things you did with your time, what did you do to grow? And I don't mean physically. I mean, okay, yeah, you're on middle school. Physical growth is something that happens in middle school. We're all aware. Get the giggles out now. I'm talking about emotionally, mentally, becoming a better version of yourself, right? What did you do to become a better friend? So you reached out to a friend who is hurting, or a better student. I know it's summer vacation, so that's kind of a... Actually, I think some of you guys are going to go back pretty soon. You're on the balanced, right? I feel like this thing's a lot quieter than the other one. But what did you do this week to grow? Like, when I was in middle school, and I think when we did the first week in this series, I talked about I ran cross country. So when I was in middle school, one of the things that I did to grow as a cross-country runner was I would run, and I would practice, I would lift weights, I would do stuff outside of just the normal practice times. And it's funny, like we had a saying when I was in cross-country, because we would watch the football players, you know, or the tennis players, or the other sports, like if they messed up, their coach would be like, hey, you need to run laps. So we actually got t-shirts that said, our sport is your sport's punishment. It's like, well, we are so hardcore that we do the things that you do, we do the things that you're trying to avoid for fun. Like, that's what we think is fun, is your punishment. You're weird kids. It's very true. But I would do things so that I could become a better runner, right? So you're probably like, okay, why is Sam up here again? Like, why is he talking about growing? What does that have to do with the series that we've been on, goals, right? Well, why are we talking about growth? I mean, we all want to be better people, right? That's kind of just taken for granted. You don't want to wake up to be that person that's like nobody wants to be around. You don't want to be that troubled kid in class that's like the teacher just dreads having you in class. Like, nobody wakes up wanting to be that person, right? We all want to grow, but it's important to realize if you're not actively trying to grow, you may wake up one morning and find out that you've grown into the thing you didn't want to be. So you wake up every morning, right? And you wake up. So there's our alarm clock. You wake up in the morning, go to school, right? You might go to practice, or spend some time on your phone playing a video game or something like that. You get home at night. You might do some homework, and then you go to bed, right? So that's your normal day. Your normal day, just kind of going through the motions. Well, that's if you're just, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. Like, there's nothing wrong with just living your life day to day. But the problem is, if you're not making the decision to grow into the person that you want to be and actively seeking that out, you can end up being the person you didn't want to be. It's like, okay, so imagine you're floating in the ocean, right? You're just out there, you're floating on your old rubber ducky, whatever. Yeah, the raft, but mine looks like a ducky, okay? Get off me. Okay, so I'm out there floating on my little ducky, and I'm not actively like rowing away from the shore, but I'm not really paying attention. I'm just floating out there. And 20 minutes later, I look up and I can't see my family, I can't see my friends. I'm completely gone from where I'm meant to be. It's the same way with your life. If you don't actively seek out to do the things that you need to do to become that better person, you can kind of drift into the wrong direction. And eventually we realize we have no idea how we got so far from where we wanted to be. Now, why does this matter? It's because we all want to grow, right? We all want to be the kind of person that people want to be around. We all want to be that nice, caring person that God calls us to be. We want to be the person that shows grace to others. We want to be around people that show grace to others. We'd all rather spend our time with people who are growing. People who are kind, loving, encouraging, joyful, patient. And we have to be that kind of person. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to, okay, yeah, you want to be around those people, but you also have to be one of those people. In other words, the goal is to grow, right? The goal is to grow. You want to grow into the person that God's calling you to be. And that should be our goal. If we're not actively seeking that out, we're kind of doing the opposite. So in the book of Galatians, we talk about the Apostle Paul. He wrote a letter to the church in Galatia, right? And there's some language that Paul used to illustrate his point in this letter. It's a little strange, so I'm going to kind of try to pull that apart a little bit before we get into the actual phrasing, right? So Paul talks to the Galatians and he says that in their lives and decisions, they're either gratifying the flesh or living by the Spirit. So that's a little confusing, right? It seems a little, I don't know, it just doesn't seem very straightforward language. Basically, all this means is that they were living for themselves, making choices that weren't really growing them in the right direction. Or living in the Spirit, they were living for God and following His Spirit inside of them, making choices that move them closer to being the people that He called them to be. And the same is true for us, right? Every day we wake up, we can do all that stuff. Or we can wake up and we can fill our day with the things that we need to do to grow closer to God and become the person that God calls us to be. And these are the fruits of the Spirit. We've got goodness. Every day we want to wake up and we want to fill our day with goodness and patience and love and gentleness and kindness, self-control, peace, faithfulness, and joy. Okay? Those are the fruits of the Spirit. And in chapter 5 of Galatians, Paul actually says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." The kind of growth that Paul was talking about wasn't just random stuff, right? He talked about every day you put your faith and your effort into growing the fruit of the Spirit. And then he listed off these things, this joy, this peace, this gentleness. Do I want to grow into somebody that's more loving or a peaceful person or all those things? That's what he talks about, is cultivating the fruits of the Spirit. We can actually be those people if we're living and walking with God and in His Spirit. These traits are like fruit on a tree, right? So if you want healthy fruit, you have to have a healthy tree. An unhealthy tree can't produce healthy fruit. In the same way, you can tell the health of the tree by the fruit that it bears. If you pull an apple off of a tree and like it looks really juicy on the outside, but then you bite into it and it's gray and mushy and gross, well, that tree isn't healthy. We can look for things like love and joy and peace and patience when we're looking at people. There's another analogy that I really like to use. Somebody pointed this out to me a couple weeks ago. I was having a discussion with somebody at work. It's like a cup of coffee. If you have a cup of coffee and it's overflowing with coffee, when somebody bumps into you, coffee is going to come flying out of that cup, right? So if you fill the cup with water, water is going to come falling out of the cup. Now follow me here. Now, if that cup is us, and we fill that cup with peace and love and gentleness, when we get jostled, that's what comes flowing out, overflowing with peace and love and gentleness. But if we fill that cup with boredom or anger or wrath, when we get jostled a little bit, that's what comes overflowing. We react with wrath and hate and just anger. Well, this is what we're talking about with the fruit of the Spirit. If you cultivate the fruit of the Spirit, if you fill your life with that fruit of the Spirit, people can see that in your life. The goal is to grow. You can tell a lot about a person based on the kind of fruit or qualities that their life produces. We can look for things like love and joy, like I was talking about. If we look at the two bowls, I think there's a noticeable difference, right? One is overflowing with the random things and actions, like we just go through our day, kind of going through the motions. And the other one is actually specific things that really help us grow into the person that God wants us to be. And the goal is to grow. That's what God wants for our lives, and that's what Paul was encouraging when he writes these words to the people in Galatia, right? He continues on and he says, if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. In other words, we can't grow these things ourselves. We can't just wake up in the morning and be like, I'm going to be a more joyful person. The best way and the way that we're called to grow is with God. We have to work with God hand in hand to cultivate those things. If we want to grow in the right direction, we have to make sure that we're walking with God and what He has to say about what He wants from us. The goal is to grow, and God is the only one who can help us meet that goal. So this week, I just want you to take, don't actually take one of these little fruits. I'm actually enjoying having them. But just pick one of these 9 fruits that I talked about, right? Like this one says faithfulness. Pick the one that you want to work on this week and just focus on that one. Pray with God, talk to God, and ask Him to really help you grow that one fruit. Like I said, this one's faithfulness. Maybe I need to go to God on staying faithful to my job and really focusing and making sure that I'm doing the things that I need to be doing at work to show not only that I'm a good worker, but I'm also a good person, and be there when people have questions about stuff. So just this week, focus on that one thing. As we break off into our small groups today, just think about that. What's one thing that I want to grow more in my life? I'm going to close in a word of prayer, and then you're free to go to your small group.